My name is Natalie Harper. I'm 29 years old, and if you had asked me a year ago what my life would look like right now, I would have said married, settled, and maybe even planning a family. Instead, I'm sitting here telling you a story about how everything I thought was secure shattered in the span of a single evening. I wasn't the kind of woman who grew up dreaming about white dresses and flower bouquets. I was the quiet, steady type, the one people described as responsible before they even knew me well. Numbers, structure, and plans made sense to me. That's why engineering called my name, why I lived inside libraries while my classmates chased nightlife. And that's why meeting David changed everything. David was my opposite. I still remember the first time he walked into my freshman seminar, charcoal smudges on his hands, a sketchbook tucked under his arm like a second skin. He was magnetic, full of bold ideas, always sketching murals on napkins and making professors both frustrated and impressed. He noticed me when no one else did, said I looked like I belonged in a painting. I laughed it off, but secretly I felt seen. By sophomore year, we were inseparable. I was the one who reminded him of deadlines and brought him coffee when he pulled all-nighters for his design classes. He was the one who coaxed me out of my study cave to dance barefoot in the rain after finals. People said we balanced each other, his fire softened by my calm, my order sparked alive by his spontaneity. After graduation, I landed a stable job at a tech firm. Nothing glamorous, but reliable with benefits and growth opportunities. David chased his dream freelance design work, bouncing between projects, always reaching for something bigger. When he quit his steady entry-level gig because it stifled his creativity, I didn't hesitate. I picked up extra shifts. I told him, we'll make it work, and I meant it. 5 years later, we were still together, living in a modest apartment with secondhand furniture and mismatched dishes. But to me, it felt cozy ours. I proposed stability. He proposed adventure. Somehow we believed that meant we were building something lasting. So when he dropped down on one knee during one of our hikes with the city skyline glowing in the distance, I didn't hesitate to say yes. My eyes stung with tears. I thought it was forever. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of checklists and deposits. I took on most of the planning because David's freelance gigs were taking off. Secretly, I turned down a promotion that would have meant moving to another city because David said, Natalie, I need stability here right now. My career is just getting traction. I agreed. I thought that was love choosing us over me. Our rehearsal dinner was set in a little Italian restaurant tucked in the corner of downtown. The air smelled of garlic bread, and red wine and laughter bounced off the walls. Family on both sides toasted to our future glasses raised high. My maid of honor, Chloe, my childhood best friend, looked radiant in a simple dress, her arms slung casually around David as they joked about some inside story. I smiled, brushed away a flicker of unease. After all, Chloe and I were like sisters. Why wouldn't they get along? But there were signs, subtle, almost invisible if you weren't looking for them. David's jokes comparing my boring routines to Chloe's spontaneous adventures. Chloe's knowing smirk when David teased me about choosing spreadsheets over road trips. I brushed them off until that night. Dinner was winding down, and I was standing beside my dad, talking about how surreal tomorrow would feel when I felt a tug at my sleeve. David's hand firm but cold. His eyes didn't match the warmth of the room. Natalie, can we talk outside? I thought maybe nerves had gotten to him. Weddings do that to people, right? My heart pounded as we stepped into the summer night. The street lamps buzzed overhead, and the warm air carried faint notes of basil and cigarette smoke from the restaurant kitchen. David paced, rubbing the back of his neck. I tried to catch his gaze, but he kept dodging me. Finally, he stopped. His voice was steady, but not kind. I need to be sure. The words sliced through me like glass. Sure about what I asked, my stomach twisting into knots. He looked over my shoulder, and that's when I saw it. Chloe's car parked just a few feet away, engine idling. Headlights dimmed. My breath caught. About us, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the restaurant toward me. Chloe. She gets it. She makes me feel alive. You've always been safe, Natalie. Reliable. But I need more than that. More passion, more excitement. Marrying you, it feels like settling. His words blurred with the hum of the streetlight. Safe, reliable. As if loyalty was a flaw. You're telling me this now, I whispered. On the night before our wedding, he shrugged, his lips curling into something that looked like a smirk. Better now than after the vows, right? Don't make a scene. It's embarrassing for both of us. Chloe's waiting. We're going to her place to figure things out. You'll be fine. You always land on your feet. I felt the world tilt. All those late nights I worked overtime to cover rent, the weekends I skipped with friends to help him polish his portfolio, the promotion I turned down, so he could chase his dreams. None of it mattered. He was walking away because I wasn't thrilling enough. I looked at Chloe sitting behind the wheel, her face barely visible in the glow of the dashboard. She wasn't guilty. She was smug. She thought she had won. So that's it, I said, my voice flat. You're leaving me for her. Yeah, he answered simply. I am. Wish me luck. And just like that, he turned his back, climbed into Chloe's car, and drove off into the night. The taillights disappeared down the street, leaving me standing alone in my white rehearsal dress, my world dismantled in a single moment. For a long time, I couldn't move. The air buzzed heavy and unreal until finally I forced myself to breathe, straighten my shoulders, and walk back into the restaurant. The room hushed when they saw I was alone. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations died on lips. I stood at the head of the table, the smell of garlic suddenly nauseating. My voice didn't shake. The wedding's off, I said simply. David's decided he's not ready. Gasps, murmurs. My mother's face drained of color, my father's jaw tightened. Chloe's empty chair told the rest of the story. Drinks are on me, I added, sliding my credit card to the waiter. Then I smiled a brittle practice thing and left. Inside my chest was caving in, but outside in the silence of my car, I swore one thing to myself. If David thought I was just his safe choice, he was about to learn how dangerous it is to underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke up to silence. Not the ordinary kind, but the kind that presses down on your chest, heavy and suffocating. My phone buzzed endlessly with missed calls and messages, his family, my friends, even one from David himself. I ignored every single one. I didn't want explanations. What could he possibly say that would erase the sight of him climbing into Chloe's car? What words could stitch back the pieces of me he so carelessly tore apart? So instead of answering, I made a list. That's who I am, lists order control. If my life had just exploded, then I'd rebuild it line by line. First task, cancel the wedding. By noon, I had called the florist, the caterer, the DJ. Most of them kept their deposits, their voices dripping with rehearsed sympathy. We're sorry to hear that, Miss Harper. We wish you the best. The best. As if such a thing existed anymore. I didn't cry. Not yet. Maybe because I was running on adrenaline. Maybe because the betrayal hadn't fully sunk in. Or maybe because a part of me refused to give David the satisfaction of breaking me. The last item on my list was the honeymoon. 2 weeks in the Caribbean. Paid in full. Non-refundable. David had insisted it would be our reward after the chaos of wedding planning. I stared at the confirmation email on my laptop, the words blurring. It should have been easy to cancel, but my finger hovered over the keyboard. Non-refundable. Thousands of dollars money I had earned, not him. And then the thought came quiet, but sharp. Why should I give up everything? He took enough from me already. So I packed a suitcase. By the next afternoon, I was sitting on a plane, headed to a place where turquoise waters and palm trees would mock me with their beauty. Alone. The first few days at the resort were torture. Couples everywhere holding hands on the beach, clinking glasses at dinner, kissing under the orange-pink sunset. Every time I saw them, I felt a fresh stab in my chest. That should have been me. That was supposed to be us. I tried to keep busy, swimming laps in the pool until my arms burned lying on the beach with a book I never opened, sipping piña coladas that tasted like melted sugar and regret. But the worst was the nights. Alone in a king-size bed with the ocean crashing just outside the balcony, the empty space beside me was like a wound that refused to heal. My mind replayed everything like a cruel movie I couldn't pause. The way David's voice sounded when he said, "You're just safe. Predictable." The smirk on Chloe's face behind the wheel. The hours I spent covering rent while David chased passion. The promotion I turned down so he could have stability. And for what? For him to decide at the 11th hour that I wasn't enough. I found myself pacing the tile floor one night, whispering the words aloud over and over. Safe, predictable. Safe, predictable. Like if I repeated them enough, I could numb the sting. But instead, memories flooded in. The time I stayed up until 3 a.m. helping him meet a client deadline. The weekend I skipped my company's networking retreat to help him set up an art show. The savings account I quietly drained when his laptop crashed because he needed the newest model. Safe, predictable. I had sacrificed pieces of myself to keep our lives afloat. My loyalty wasn't boring. It was the only reason we survived as long as we did. That thought lodged itself in me like a splinter. By day 4, the fog started to thin. I wandered farther down the beach, away from the couples and their laughter. I climbed a rocky trail that curved behind the resort, the sea breeze whipping my hair into knots. At the top, I found a hidden overlook. Just me, the cliffs, and the endless horizon. For the first time in days, I breathed, without feeling like I was suffocating. The waves didn't care about David. The sky didn't know Chloe's name. The world stretched on vast and indifferent, and maybe that was a kind of comfort. I took out my phone and snapped a picture, just the ocean, no people. No captions, no filters. For once, not for anyone else's eyes. Just mine. That night, I ate dinner at the bar instead of my room. A group of travelers invited me to join them. Backpackers, mostly laughing, swapping stories, planning their next adventure. They didn't know me, didn't know my story, and for a few hours, I wasn't the woman left at the altar. I was just Natalie sipping rum and listening to strangers sing off-key karaoke. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was something. By the end of the week, I realized something else. Solitude has a strange way of stripping away illusions. Alone with my thoughts, I saw David differently. Not as the man who had once swept me off my feet, but as a boy who needed constant chaos to feel alive. His betrayal said more about him than it did about me. It wasn't that I was predictable, it was that he couldn't stand stability, couldn't handle the weight of real commitment. He craved fireworks that burned bright and fast even if they left nothing but ashes. And Chloe, my best friend, my so-called sister, was just his next sparkler. The realization didn't erase the hurt, but it shifted something inside me. For the first time, I thought maybe losing him wasn't the end of me. Maybe it was the beginning. I cut the trip short. After 10 days, I packed my bags, left the untouched honeymoon suite, and boarded a flight home. The last night I spent on the island, I stood barefoot on the sand, watching the moonlight ripple across the waves. I whispered one promise to myself: I will not let this betrayal define me. I will rebuild piece by piece until I no longer remember what it felt like to be discarded. And with that, I walked back to my room, slid the keycard into the lock, and shut the door behind me. The honeymoon that should have been ours became the first step of mine alone. When I got back from the Caribbean, my apartment felt like a crime scene. Every corner carried a memory. The dent on the couch where David sprawled with his sketchbook. The chipped mug he swore made coffee taste better. The stack of unpaid bills on the counter that I always ended up covering. I stood in the doorway for a long time, suitcase in hand, before finally stepping inside. The air smelled stale thick with the ghost of a life I no longer wanted. That's when I decided I couldn't stay here. 2 days later, I called my boss, the same one who had offered me a promotion I'd once turned down. My voice was steady, almost unnervingly so. "Is the position still available?" I asked. There was a pause, then his voice lit up. "We haven't filled it yet, Natalie. If you're ready, we'll make it happen." That's how within a month I packed up what little was mine donated, David's abandoned clutter, to charity, and moved to a new city. It wasn't far, just a couple of hours away, but it was enough. Enough distance to breathe, enough to start over. The new apartment was small but full of light, with wide windows that overlooked the bustle of downtown. At night, I could hear the hum of traffic, the occasional siren, the life of a city that didn't know my story. That anonymity was a gift. I threw myself into work. The promotion came with longer hours and higher stakes, but I welcomed the challenge. Projects that once intimidated me now felt like distractions from the hollow ache in my chest. Each deadline met was a small victory, proof that I could build something stable on my own. Still, I knew I couldn't outrun the hurt forever. The betrayal had carved itself into me, sharp and unrelenting. So for the first time in my life, I went to therapy. The first session, I sat stiff in the chair, arms crossed, defensive. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Rivera, asked me to talk about the rehearsal dinner. I thought I'd choke on the words, but instead they spilled out raw and jagged. How could he say I was boring? I demanded, my voice breaking. I gave up everything for him. I worked myself sick so he could chase dreams. I turned down my own future so he could have one. How is that boring? Dr. Rivera leaned forward, her eyes kind but firm. Natalie, what he said wasn't about you. It was about him. People who need chaos often project their emptiness onto others. He wasn't describing you, he was describing what he lacked. Her words lodged in my chest. For the first time, I saw it clearly. David hadn't left because I wasn't enough. He left because he couldn't handle enough. Session by session, we unpacked the knots inside me, the anger, the grief, the shame of being left for someone who was supposed to be my best friend. Slowly, the weight began to shift. I also rebuilt myself in smaller, quieter ways. I joined a gym more out of desperation than enthusiasm. At first, I hated it. The blaring music, the sweaty air, the mirrors, reflecting every ounce of my exhaustion. But after a few weeks, I started to notice changes. My body grew stronger, leaner. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. I started hiking again too, alone this time. Just me, the trails, and the whisper of trees overhead. At the summit of one steep climb, I set up a small tripod and snapped a photo of myself against the horizon. My smile was tentative, but it was real. Photography, once just a hobby, David teased me for, became my therapy. I carried my camera everywhere, capturing city skylines at dusk, strangers laughing in cafes, the way raindrops clung to my window in the morning. Each photo was proof that beauty still existed, even in the aftermath of betrayal. I won't lie. There were nights I broke down. Nights when I scrolled past old photos of David and me on social media, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Nights when Chloe's betrayal clawed at me more than his did. She was supposed to be my sister in everything but blood, losing her cut just as deep. But with each sunrise, the pain dulled a little. The city lights blurred into routine. My work sharpened my focus, and the therapy sessions rewired my thoughts. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was no longer surviving. I was rebuilding. One Friday evening, after a long week, I stood on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset bleed across the skyline. For the first time since the wedding that never was, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt possibility. I whispered it aloud to no one but myself. This is my life now, and it's mine alone. The words didn't feel like defeat. They felt like freedom. A week later, I ran into a mutual friend from my old city, someone who hadn't picked sides after everything fell apart. We grabbed coffee, and as we settled into the cafe booth, he leaned across the table. "Have you heard about David and Chloe?" he asked carefully. I froze, my fingers tightening around the cup. My instinct was to say I didn't care, but the truth was I did. Curiosity hummed inside me, sharp and dangerous. "No," I said evenly. "What about them?" He hesitated, then gave a half smile, half grimace. "Let's just say, things aren't as perfect as they make it look online." I sipped my coffee, heart pounding, but I didn't press him for details. Not yet. Instead, I tucked the information away, like a card I'd play when I was ready. Because for the first time, I realized I wasn't defined by what David and Chloe did. My story didn't end the night he walked out of that restaurant. It was only just beginning. The rumor that David and Chloe's perfect little escape wasn't so perfect gnawed at me for days. I tried to shove it aside to focus on work, on therapy, on the slow rhythm of my healing. But curiosity has a way of prying into wounds you thought were closing. I didn't have to wait long. Word travels fast in mutual circles, even when you've tried to cut the ties. A week after that cafe conversation, my phone buzzed with a message from Mike, an old college friend who'd stayed mostly neutral in the fallout. "Nat, not sure if you want to hear this, but David and Chloe are kind of imploding." I stared at the message for a long time. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It was just this quiet hum inside me, like a storm brewing, far out at sea. Finally, I typed back, "What do you mean?" Mike didn't hold back. Apparently, the so-called adventure David had promised Chloe had soured quickly. The spontaneity that once made her laugh now turned reckless. He'd drag her on last-minute road trips, blowing through savings on expensive hotels and parties. He'd quit freelance projects halfway through because he got bored. When clients complained, he shrugged it off. Unreliable wasn't charming when rent was due. And then there was his temper. At first, it was just sharp words jealousy when Chloe worked late with male colleagues. Then it escalated, yelling accusations, holes punched in walls. He accused her of cheating, even though he was the one still texting his ex behind her back. By the time Chloe realized what she'd walked into, she was in too deep. She dipped into her savings to cover the bills, even maxed out her credit cards. David drained her not just emotionally, but financially, the same way he had drained me. Only difference I had held the line quietly keeping us afloat. Chloe, she didn't know how to carry him. I should have felt satisfaction. Karma had arrived punctual and ruthless. But sitting there in my apartment reading Mike's words, I felt something colder. Not joy, not pity, just confirmation. David hadn't left me because I was boring. He left because he was a man who thrived on chaos. And Chloe, she was just the next casualty in his wake. I remembered the smug look on her face that night in the car, the way she smirked as if she'd won some prize. She hadn't won anything. She'd stepped into quicksand, and now it was swallowing her whole. Over the next few months, little pieces of their downfall trickled to me, like unwanted souvenirs. From a mutual friend's Instagram story, I saw Chloe post vague quotes about being betrayed by those you trust. The irony almost made me laugh. Another friend mentioned at a party that David had been kicked out of Chloe's apartment after she discovered he was sleeping with an ex-girlfriend. He laughed in her face when she confronted him, the friend said, disgusted. Meanwhile, Chloe's once bustling social media presence grew quiet. No more selfies of spontaneous road trips, no more champagne glasses clinking. Just silence. It was strange watching their implosion from the sidelines, like standing outside a burning house you used to live in, horrified by the flames, but grateful you're no longer inside. The final confirmation came one evening when my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello. Silence. Then a shaky voice. Natalie, it's Chloe. I froze my breath, catching. For a second, I thought about hanging up, but something curiosity, maybe cruelty, kept me on the line. What do you want? I asked, my voice sharp. Her words tumbled out in a rush. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. David, he's not who I thought he was. He's cheated, lied, used me. I'm drowning. And I know you probably hate me, but I don't know who else to turn to. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. My heart pounded, but my face was calm. You're right, I finally said. I do hate you. You were supposed to be my best friend Chloe, my sister. And you sat in that car while he walked out on me. Do you remember how you smirked at me that night? Her breath hitched. Natalie, I cut her off. You chose him. You chose to betray me. Now you can live with the consequences. And I hung up. For the first time since that night, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not healing, but power. The power of knowing I no longer needed them. Therapy taught me that closure doesn't always come wrapped in apologies or explanations. Sometimes closure is simply the moment you stop caring. And as I stood on my balcony later that night, city lights flickering below, I realized David and Chloe were fading from my life like background noise. Their downfall wasn't my revenge. It wasn't even my justice. It was just the natural consequence of who they were. And me, I was no longer their victim. I was someone rebuilding one brick at a time in a city where their names meant nothing. Still, part of me knew it wasn't over. People like David never just disappear. They circle back hungry for the stability they once mocked. And deep down, I felt the shift in the air, the foreshadowing of footsteps I hadn't yet heard. For a while, I convinced myself that David and Chloe's implosion would be the last I'd hear of them. That their chaos would stay on the periphery of my life whispers I could ignore while I built something better for myself. But I should have known better. People like David don't fade quietly. They circle back, sniffing around the ruins of what they've destroyed, hoping to reclaim the comfort they once spat on. The first message came late on a Tuesday night. A simple text from an unknown number. Natalie, hey, can we talk? I stared at it, my thumb hovering. I didn't need to ask who it was. The mix of entitlement and false humility dripped off the screen. I didn't reply. The next morning, another message arrived. I messed up. Chloe isn't who I thought she was. You were always the one who kept me grounded. Please just hear me out. I felt my stomach tighten, not from longing, but from anger. After everything, the humiliation at the rehearsal dinner, the betrayal, the smugness. He thought he could just slip back into my life with a few pathetic lines. I deleted the messages without answering. But David was nothing if not persistent. Within a week, I had voicemails piling up from different numbers. His voice shifted with each one pleading in one manipulative in another, then outright angry. Nat, please, I know I hurt you, but I've changed. I see now what I lost. You think you're better off without me? You're not. You'll never find someone who understands you like I do. How can you be so cold after everything I gave you? You owe me at least a conversation. Owe him. The words made my blood boil. I owed him nothing. If anything, he owed me years of my life back. It wasn't just him. His desperation bled into the people around him. One afternoon, I answered a call from a number I didn't recognize, only to hear Chloe's mother on the other end. Her tone was sharp, accusing. Natalie, you need to talk to David. He's going through hell because of what happened with Chloe. You two had something real, and it's cruel of you to just abandon him like this. I almost laughed. Abandon him. He abandoned me at the altar for her daughter. Mrs. Lane, I said evenly. David made his choice. At my rehearsal dinner. He doesn't get to come back now because it fell apart. She huffed, furious. Real women forgive. You've always been too rigid, Natalie. That's why I hung up. The old me might have cried. After that, might have twisted her words into knives against my own worth. But now I only felt clarity. Their manipulation no longer worked on me. It escalated. A friend from our old circle showed up at my gym, awkwardly cornering me near the lockers. Come on, Nat, he said, lowering his voice. He's a mess. He admits he screwed up. Can't you at least give him closure? I wiped sweat from my brow, looked him dead in the eye. Closure is what you get when someone slams the door in your face and doesn't open it again. He has his closure. The friend shifted uncomfortably, muttered something about loyalty, then slunk away. The worst was the night David showed up outside my new apartment building. It was nearly midnight, the city quiet except for the distant rumble of traffic. I'd just stepped onto my balcony when I heard it, his voice calling my name from the sidewalk below. Natalie, please, just 5 minutes, I need to explain. My chest tightened, panic flickering like lightning. How had he found my address, my sanctuary? I ducked back inside, heart pounding. Through the window, I saw him pacing his hands, gesturing wildly, his face desperate under the glow of the street lamp. I didn't go down. I didn't answer. Instead, I called building security, my voice shaking but firm. There's a man outside shouting my name. I don't want him here. By the time security arrived, David was gone. But the violation lingered sour and heavy. My safe place no longer felt safe. In therapy, I told Dr. Rivera about it, about the voicemails, the calls, the confrontation at the gym. She listened quietly, then asked, "What do you feel when you hear his voice now?" I thought about it. Once it would have been longing, or grief, or even rage. But now annoyed, I admitted, like a mosquito buzzing in my ear. Dr. Rivera smiled gently. That's progress. Annoyance means you no longer see him as someone with power over you, just as a nuisance. Her words settled over me like a balm. She was right. He wasn't a storm anymore. He was static. Still, his desperation didn't stop. One voicemail left at 3 a.m. seared itself into my mind. How can you do this, Natalie? How can you move on like I never mattered? I made a mistake, but I came back, didn't I? That should count for something. No, I thought as I deleted it. It counted for nothing. Because coming back after wrecking me wasn't noble, it was cowardice. It wasn't love, it was fear of being alone. And I refused to be his safety net. By the end of the month, I changed my number, locked down my social media, warned my building about him. The silence that followed was blissful. On my balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the city gold, I whispered it aloud just to hear the truth of it. He's not my problem anymore. And for the first time, I believed it. But deep down, I knew this was just one battle. David wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily. His ego wouldn't let him. And sure enough, the next chapter of my life would prove that letting go wasn't enough. I would have to stand firm again and again until he finally realized I was not his safe choice. I was his closed door. After I changed my number and tightened the locks on my life, silence finally returned. At first, it was disorienting. I'd grown used to the constant buzz of David's desperate attempts, voicemails, texts, rumors that dragged me back into his orbit. But now, nothing. It was like stepping into a room where the noise had suddenly been cut. My shoulders unclenched. My breath came easier. The quiet was mine, and I guarded it fiercely. But silence has two sides. On some nights, it was peace. On others, it was loneliness. I'd tell myself I was fine being alone, that I didn't need anyone. And in truth, I didn't. I had rebuilt myself brick by brick, therapy work, independence hobbies. But sometimes when I came back from a long hike or cooked dinner for one, I'd feel the echo of something missing. Not David, never David, but companionship. It was on one of those hikes that I met Joseph. The trail was steep, the kind that left your calves burning and your lungs begging for mercy. I'd stopped at a scenic overlook fiddling with my camera when I noticed him standing a few feet away adjusting a tripod. He caught me glancing and grinned. Perfect light tonight, isn't it? I nodded a little wary. Yeah, best just before sunset. He pointed at my camera. You shoot manual or auto? Manual, I said, maybe a touch defensively. His grin widened. Good answer. Auto's cheating. I laughed before I could stop myself. It had been so long since I'd laughed around a stranger. We ended up talking until the sun dipped below the horizon, trading photography tips and trail stories. His voice was steady, his humor easy, but what struck me most was his presence. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't performing. He was just there, authentic, grounded. Before we parted ways, he asked if I wanted to join his hiking group that weekend. No pressure, he said, scribbling the details on a scrap of paper. We're just a bunch of people who like walking uphill for fun. I took the paper. For the first time in a long while, I felt curiosity, rather than dread, about letting someone new into my life. That weekend, I showed up. The group was small, diverse teachers, students, an older couple who had been married 30 years. Joseph was the unofficial leader, guiding us with patience, cracking jokes when the trail grew tough. He never singled me out, never pushed for my attention, just let me be. And yet I noticed him. The way he carried extra water in case someone ran out. The way he paused to help an elderly hiker over a tricky patch. The way he listened more than he spoke. Afterward, as we stretched by the trailhead, he caught my eye. Still think auto mode's cheating. I smiled, more than ever. We grabbed coffee, then dinner the week after. Slowly, cautiously, something grew. Dating again terrified me. Every time Joseph texted, part of me flinched, waiting for the manipulation, the hidden barbs, the games David used to play. But Joseph wasn't David. When I said I was busy, he respected it. When I hesitated to share something personal, he didn't pry. When I talked about hiking or work, he actually listened, not as a prelude to talking about himself, but as if what I said mattered. It was unnerving at first. Kindness can feel like a trap when you've only known conditional love. But over time, the walls I'd built began to lower brick by cautious brick. 3 months in, Joseph suggested a weekend trip. Nothing fancy, he said. Just the coast. Fresh air, some photography, maybe good seafood if we're lucky. The coast. My chest tightened. The Caribbean, the honeymoon that never was, flashed through my mind. The turquoise waves, the empty bed, the nights of loneliness. I must have gone quiet because he asked gently. Too soon. I took a deep breath. No, maybe it's exactly what I need. We went, and it was nothing like before. The beach wasn't filled with mocking couples this time. It was just us laughing as the wind tangled my hair, taking turns with the camera chasing seagulls like kids. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Joseph handed me the camera. Your turn. Capture this moment. I snapped a photo of him silhouetted against the waves. Then he turned the camera back on me, crouching slightly. Okay, Natalie. Smile. And I did. Not the brittle smile I wore the night of the rehearsal dinner. Not the forced one from my solo Caribbean trip. A real one. The kind that bubbled up from somewhere deep, surprising even me. Later that night, sitting by a bonfire, he leaned closer. You know what I like most about you? I braced myself instinctively. But his answer was simple. You're steady. In a world full of chaos that's rare, don't ever let anyone tell you it's boring. Something broke inside me then, not in a painful way, but like a knot unraveling. For years, David had twisted my steadiness into a flaw. Joseph saw it as my strength. And for the first time, I believed it. When we got back, I printed one of the photos from that trip. Me laughing by the water hair, wild eyes crinkled. I framed it, hung it by my desk. A reminder that the woman who had been left behind at a rehearsal dinner wasn't the same woman standing there now. She was stronger, braver, and finally moving on. Still, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind. What happens when David finds out? Because men like him never disappear completely. And something told me he wasn't finished trying to claw his way back into my story. For a while, life felt steady. Joseph and I grew closer, not in a whirlwind, but in the quiet, deliberate way you build something real. Weekend hikes, shared dinners. Long conversations about everything from childhood memories to where we wanted to be in 5 years. It was the first time in my adult life I felt safe with someone, not because I was his safety net, but because we were equals. Partners. But peace never lasts long when people like David are out there watching. I didn't expect him to find out about Joseph. I'd kept my social media private, careful about what I shared. But word has a way of traveling through mutual friends, through whispers that snake their way back to the people you'd rather forget. One evening, Joseph and I posted a photo from our coastal trip. Just us on the beach, grinning at the camera, arms around each other. I hesitated before hitting share, but Joseph squeezed my hand. Don't hide your happiness, Nat, he said. You've earned it. So I posted it. 3 days later, the storm arrived. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter slid under my apartment door. My stomach dropped when I recognized his handwriting. The words were dramatic, almost theatrical. Natalie, I've seen the pictures. I can't believe you'd flaunt this in my face. After everything we had, after everything we could have been, you replace me like I'm nothing. Don't fool yourself. He'll never understand you the way I did. You're mine, Natalie. You've always been mine. My hands trembled, but not with fear, with fury. He still believed I belonged to him. I tore the letter in half, then in half again, until it was nothing but scraps. A week later, he showed up. Joseph and I had just come back from the farmer's market, arms full of groceries, when I saw him leaning against the entrance of my building, disheveled eyes bloodshot as if the months had ground him down. Natalie, he called out, his voice hoarse. Please, just talk to me. Joseph stiffened beside me, protective. I touched his arm. It's okay. Let me handle this. We stopped a few feet away. I set the grocery bags down, straightened my shoulders, and looked David dead in the eye. What are you doing here? I asked, my tone ice. He stepped closer, hands outstretched. I made a mistake. Chloe, she was a disaster. You were the one who kept me grounded. Nat, I see that now. We can fix this. We can start over. I laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. Start over. Do you remember what you said to me the night before our wedding? You called me boring. Predictable. You left me standing in a parking lot while you drove away with my best friend. That's not something you start over from. His face twisted. I was confused. I thought I needed excitement, but what I needed was you. You're steady. You're safe. That's what I want now. Safe. The same word he once wielded as a weapon, now rebranded as a compliment. No, I said firmly. What you want is a fallback. Someone to clean up your mess when you burn everything down. But I'm not your safety net, not anymore. His eyes flicked to Joseph, who had moved subtly closer, his presence solid beside me. Jealousy flared across David's face. So this is him, David sneered. This guy, he's just a rebound. He doesn't know you like I do. Joseph didn't flinch. What I know, he said evenly, is that she deserves respect, and you clearly don't have any to give. David's jaw clenched, but I stepped forward, cutting off the tension before it escalated. Listen to me, David, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to crawl back because your gamble failed. You threw me away. You don't get me back. His eyes glossed with desperation. You'll regret this, Natalie. He'll leave you. Everyone leaves you. I shook my head. No, David. You left me, and the only thing I regret is wasting so many years thinking I needed to save you. I picked up my groceries, took Joseph's hand, and turned toward the building. Behind us, David's voice cracked into a shout. You'll come back. You always come back. But the words rang hollow, echoing into nothing. Inside, as the door closed behind us, my chest rose and fell with the weight of finality. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony, Joseph's arm draped casually around my shoulders, and thought about everything that had led me here. The girl who once believed loyalty was enough. The woman who stood in a rehearsal dress watching her world collapse. The silence of a Caribbean honeymoon suite, the loneliness, the anger. And now this. Peace. Love that didn't demand self-erasure. A man who valued my steadiness instead of resenting it. I whispered it softly, almost to myself. This chapter is closed. Joseph looked down at me. What did you say? I smiled. Nothing. Just, I'm free. And for the first time, I truly was. David would fade. Chloe would fade. Their chaos would burn itself out because that's all it knew how to do. But me, I'd built something steady brick by careful brick, and I wasn't afraid of being predictable anymore. Because predictable wasn't boring. Predictable was safe. Predictable was strong. And predictable had saved me.